Hi everyone, this is Chen with Pearson with Realty, and I wanted to do a buyer's guide to purchasing a home right now in a very competitive seller's market. So right now, buyers are coming out into the market in droves because they are trying to take advantage of the very low interest rates. And I think sellers are still wary of putting their home on the market due to COVID. So it really is creating a very competitive market for buyers. So what can you do to be savvy and let your offer stand out in this multiple offer situation? So first of all, it's important to know what contingencies are and what are in place in an offer so that the buyer and realtor can then figure out how to make the offer more competitive. Contingencies are basically what I call safeguards or protections for the buyer. It's put into place in an offer to allow buyers to void the contract if needed. Now, these are items that also can be waived, and this is how you can make your offer more competitive. So the first contingency is the home inspection. Now, there's two choices for buyers. Basically, you can do a home inspection and ask for repairs from the seller, or you can do a home inspection for informational purposes only. So in both situations, you can void the contract if you don't like the results. However, in a situation like this where it's a seller's market, it's almost imperative that as a buyer, you do not ask for repairs. This is because sellers do not want to affect their bottom line by having to spend more money to do repairs. And finally, some people are even waiving home inspections altogether. So they're doing the home inspection, but they're not making it contingent on the home inspection. So meaning they cannot get out of the contract, they cannot void the contract based on home inspection results. Another way to make your offer competitive is by waiving the appraisal contingency. So any offer that comes with a loan is going to come with an appraisal. That's because a lender wants to know how much a home is actually worth in order to give you that loan amount. Sometimes the lender can give you an appraisal waiver for that property, but it has to qualify for it. So in the event of a low appraisal, the seller was going to either have to come down to the appraised value, or the buyer's going to have to come up in cash between the appraised value and the offer price. And the third is where the buyer and the seller can negotiate and meet in the middle somewhere. If you can't come to an agreement, the buyer can void their contract. Now, in a multiple offer situation, a lot of buyers are actually voiding their appraisal contingency. And what that means is that regardless of what the appraised value comes out to, they're committing to pay that difference of the appraised value and the offer price in cash. So obviously that makes buyers nervous. If you're in an area and purchasing a home where there's not a lot of comps, recent sales, then of course it's a little nerve-wracking to do something like that. But if you're in the city or the suburbs where there's a lot of data and recent sales, it would help you to feel more comfortable to waive that appraisal because it's easier to figure out what that home is actually worth. The third waiver is the finance contingency. Some people are waiving this. So if a buyer receives a pre-approval and then it turns out at the end that the loan can't be approved, the buyer can still get out of the sales contract. And most people will want to retain that finance contingency because they need the loan to go through in order to purchase the home. But if it isn't approved, they want to be able to get their earnest money back. And so this is what they call the EMD, earnest money deposit, which is provided at the beginning when the contract is ratified. But some buyers are willing to waive the finance contingency and basically risk losing this earnest money deposit if their loan does not go through. And they'll do this again in a very competitive multiple offer situation. The fourth way to make your offer competitive is not having a home sale contingency. What that means is a buyer doesn't have to sell a home in order to purchase a new one, or maybe the buyer does have to sell a home, but they don't need the proceeds from the sale of the home in order to purchase the new one. This is because the home sale contingency is basically saying that if the buyer's current home does not sell, then the buyer can get out of purchasing the home that they have a contract on. And a lot of sellers don't want to take the risk of putting their house off the market in order to find out later that the buyer's current home is not selling. So even though it's hard sometimes for a buyer to put their house on the market if they don't have a property identified, or if they don't have a ratified contract yet, sometimes you might want to consider doing this anyway to gain a more competitive stance so that you don't have a home sale contingency. Right now, in a competitive market, sellers aren't even taking settlement contingencies, and that means that the home is on the market and has a ratified contract, but some sellers are still not wanting to even take that. So there are a few other ways to make your offer more competitive. So many sellers are wanting a quick 30-day close or less, and that's why it's really important for buyers to get all their documents to the lender ahead of time, and even have the lender start processing these documents before before you even have a property identified. It can't go into underwriting yet because the property isn't identified, but the lender can still at least start processing it. And that's because a lot of these bigger banks are requiring 35 to 45 days to close. So that's one way. Another way to make your offer more competitive is by offering a higher earnest money deposit. So right now, the standard, what I'm seeing people do is about 1% of the sales price, but you could offer more. This is a way to show the buyer how serious you are about this house. And basically you're saying, if all the contingencies have either been waived or they've been met and the deadline for these contingencies have expired, I'm willing to risk this earnest money deposit if I change my mind and want to void the contract. So that usually happens at the very end if somehow a buyer has remorse or they find another house on the market down the street, something like that, where they really want that house instead and they're willing to waive that money and give that money to the seller. Finally, a great way to have a very competitive offer is to include an escalation addendum. Even though a buyer is still offering a price to the seller, a buyer is still putting in an escalation amount, and that is a max ceiling that they're not willing to go over, a max ceiling amount. And then you also put down an increment of $2,000, $3,000, whatever you want it to be, of how much you want to beat the next best offer by. So for example, let's say you put in an escalation addendum, somebody else does not, and the house is worth $500,000. Let's say you offer $500, but someone else offers $505 with no escalation. So because your max ceiling is $510 with an increment of $2K, you could still beat that other offer by $507. That's because the other person's offer was $505, yours was $500, and you're beating it by $2,000, so you can win it at $507. Now, let's say the other person is also putting in an escalation clause. So now you both have two escalation clauses. So let's say you offer $500. Let's say the house is worth $500. You offer $505. Go all the way up to $520 for your max ceiling in 2K increments. The other offer is offering $507 with a max ceiling of $515 in $1,500 increments. So you would win it at $517. This is because even though you offered $505, the other person beat you at $507, but your max is going all the way to $520. The other person's max is only going up to $515, but you offered an increment of $2K. So you're winning it at $517. So $2,000 over $515, which is the max of the other person. So hope that makes sense. That's $17,000 over list price. So with escalation clauses, you definitely can go a lot higher than what you originally intended, but it will help you win in that multiple offer situation. So again, there are many ways to make your offer competitive. A great and experienced real estate agent like myself can help you make these choices and explain it to you clearly so you know what you're getting into when you waive contingencies. In this seller's market, you really want to work with the best and give it your best to win that dream home. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.